The last episode of Surviving Earth is officially out. This one is called When America Flooded. The catastrophe that we're taking a look at here is an event that took place around 12,000 years ago when melting ice caps caused a lot of cold water to go into the North Atlantic Current, which then caused temperatures to plummet again and sent the Earth deeper into an ice age. In this episode, we are following a mother Arctodus as she tries to protect and take care of her cubs. Arctodus is also known as the giant short-faced bear. Of course, one of the largest bears to ever exist. It was once again really great to spend so much time in the Cenozoic. Especially in the Pleistocene, which is a time that I find really interesting, in large part because it is such a recent time. Like, it wasn't really that far off. This episode is only set 12,000 years ago, and so there's a lot of creatures that we recognize, but there's still a lot of creatures that, are kind of a little bit more unfamiliar to us. I thought that the setting was really great. I really liked the story. I was incredibly attached to this mother Arctodus as she just was doing her best to take care of her cubs, and it just felt like she could not catch a break, which really did break my heart over the course of the episode. They chose some incredibly beautiful landscapes to use for this episode. Everything was just so full of life. There were forests everywhere. There was gorgeous mountains in the background. The rivers looked amazing. Everything about this episode just felt incredibly beautiful, I think is the best word to use for it. Obviously, there's a lot of incredible creatures that make an appearance in this. Some of the more obvious ones include the dire wolves, Anasion dirus. They looked pretty good. Like they're in some ways they kind of looked like gray wolves. In fact, I think that they used like actual wolf footage for them sometimes, but when you got like a closer look to them, there's like a little tint of orange in their fur coloration, which I thought was a nice detail. There was also a stag moose known as Ceracles scotti, I believe. I think that's the specific type of deer that we were looking at here. I think I've seen pictures of the stag moose before, but it was still just like it still kind of caught me off guard when I saw those antlers. They were just so incredibly strange. And that's why I love extinct deer, because sometimes they were just doing insanely weird things with their head ornamentation. And the stag moose is certainly no exception. I loved the inclusion of the stag moose because in a way it feels like it's a little bit more familiar to us, because obviously we still have moose today, but it's different in the fact that its antlers are just bizarre. Like they're just out there. So I'm glad that they included a creature like that. Obviously, woolly mammoths make an appearance and they look beautiful, of course. I don't think I've ever seen a single bad woolly mammoth design, and this is no exception. They're properly woolly. They all have like a brown coloration. I mean, woolly mammoths had a variety of different colors. Some of them were more blonde, some of them were a bit more black in coloration, some were reddish. But in this episode, we mainly just saw the classic brown mammoth, which is still an accurate reconstruction of the woolly mammoth. Alongside the woolly mammoths were mastodons. That was a really nice sight to see because you don't really see much of the American mastodon nowadays. It felt like back in the olden days of paleomedia, it would show up a lot more frequently, but now it seems like it's more often than not swapped out for its more popular elephant relative, that being, of course, the woolly mammoth. I really liked the mastodon design right here. It looked properly distinct from the woolly mammoth. It even had like more sparse hair. Like the hair was just kind of like a bit more thin, not quite as woolly as the mammoth. It didn't have like pronounced shoulders, and it was a bit more stocky compared to the woolly mammoth. It was great. I loved its design and I loved its inclusion right here. Now, like I mentioned, there's also a plethora of animals that you could recognize. The Pleistocene is such a cool time because, again, it was so recent that the animals that you see today existed back then as well. There was a lot of great shots of like some caribou. There were some moose that we're more familiar with. A porcupine at one point, the little baby Arctodus, they were messing with the porcupine. It was very cute and actually kind of sad at the same time. And obviously, humans made an appearance in this episode, and they were actually a part of the episode, which is quite a bit different from Prehistoric Planet Ice Age. I know that that was one big disappointment that people had with that documentary, the fact that humans didn't really have a huge role to play, only showing up at the very end, like the final shot. they had a role to play in this episode. And I liked how they were introduced like they were just a part of the environment, because obviously they were, and we still are. Humans are still very much a part of nature, and obviously that would have been true back then as well. It was just great to see them all around. Like, it was just really great to see them. Now, like I mentioned before, I really did like the portrayal of the Arctodus in this episode. Their design was really nice. I loved the patterns that they had in their face, and they were just so huge and beefy. It was an incredible sight to see overall. The babies were adorable, and it made me feel for them, and made me even more sad when the tragedy struck later on. There was a male Arctodus that looked very distinct from the mother. He had scarring and I think different patterns. Everything was just great about the animal designs in this episode. But that's been true for the entire show. Now, one of the babies does eventually die in this episode, which was really quite sad. It loses its life to the male Arctodus. It happens off screen, but it does indeed happen. Preceding that, like before that happened, the mother got into a fight with the male. And it was a pretty good portrayal of a bear fight. Like, I know that many of you have probably seen footage of bears fighting each other. It looked like that. You know, the way the bears fight. They stand up on their hind limbs. They use their paws a lot, and they're like biting at each other. It seemed like they did their homework, like the animators did their homework, and it felt like a proper bear fight. Now, towards the end of the episode, once temperatures start to drop again, the mother is forced to try to go and look for food because she doesn't have enough milk to take care of her little cub. And so she's desperate. She needs to find something. She comes across a human camp. And man, let me tell you, this entire scene felt like a piece of paleo art that has been animated. I feel like I've seen a lot of like paleo art pieces that depict this very same thing, where you have a giant Arctodus, a giant short-faced bear, facing off against some humans, as they have, of course, their spears and they have some fire. That's exactly what occurred in this portion, and I thought it was very cool, and it certainly put things into perspective. This is the only episode where you can actually compare the size of at least one of your animals in your episode with humans, and man, they are staring up to it. It's just a huge bear, and it was horrifying. Now, she runs off with some caribou meat, and she manages to bring it back to her cub. But unfortunately, that little section, like the past section, ends with the revelation that she has been stabbed by a spear, and they made sure to let us know that she's not going to survive, and her cub will be on his own. I don't think they clarified the sex of the cub, but it's going to be on its own. And I don't know why they had to do that. It's not a complaint. I'm just sad about it, because again, I was really attached to this mother and her babies. So then that kind of decreases the odds that the baby's going to survive, which makes it even worse if you ask me. Now, the episode jumps forward 1,000 years. The Earth is starting to, warm up once again. And as a result, a lot of the megafauna was starting to go extinct. A lot of animals in the Ice Age were adapted for ice. They were adapted for cooler conditions. And once that was starting to be taken away from them, they couldn't adapt to that environment. And so they went extinct. There's a lot of gaps in the North American landscape. There used to be elephants, camels, all kinds of different creatures that once inhabited here. But once the environments and climates started to change, they started to go extinct. They showed us that the woolly mammoths and the mastodon were on their last legs in the episode, and they end off with like a woolly mammoth getting killed by some humans. All around, I really liked this episode too. So far, currently how I feel right now, I think the Cenozoic episodes are my favorite of the entire show. I'm going to start working on a full review of the series that will go live probably sometime next week. And I'll let you know if I still feel that way after I've kind of put my thoughts to, some paper and kind of thought everything out a little bit more. But so far, I really liked the Cenozoic episodes. I think that they did a fantastic job at portraying these animals in a way that felt realistic, while also portray them in such a way that you're telling a compelling story. Really, a lot of my criticisms right now kind of stem from what happened outside of the show. I'm sure many of you have heard about the Tim Haynes situation, and I just got to say that I'm incredibly disappointed about what he said in favor for generative AI. And it just feels like what he said at DinoCon is like a huge contradiction to what this show is. This show is a show that was heavily made by artists. Like every single creature was designed by a paleo artist, and you can tell in the show. Not to mention, it's a series that is greatly about climate change. It's a series that is greatly about environmental changes, and the whole point of the show was to portray these mass extinctions in such a way that it connects to what's going on in the modern day world. And generative AI is something that is affecting the modern day climate. Of course, it is not good for the environment, generative AI. It is using a ton of water, and it is doing a lot of bad things to the atmosphere. It's not good no matter how you want to slice it, and it's certainly not good to use it during a climate crisis, which is something that we are currently in. This show was about climate crises, and it just felt weird that someone who was so attached, like so connected to this show in such a big way, decided to endorse the use of generative AI and call it the future of like paleo documentaries. I'm incredibly disappointed about that. And I'm sorry to kind of like end this video on a little bit more of a negative note, but I really wanted to bring it up because, I had some friends who were at DinoCon who listened to the whole thing, and just all around it was incredibly disappointing to hear about. But like I said, I will have my full thoughts about the show in a full video sometime next week. There we will praise all of the artists and writers involved with this show, and we'll talk about a lot of the good things that this show had to offer. But that's pretty much all I have for this one right now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have an awesome day.